Hey, boys and girls, you guys have been doing such an amazing job on your addition and subtraction word problems. Keep up the hard work, but some of us we've noticed are simply just stating an answer, which is great because most of you are having the correct answer. But today I'm here to teach you that when you do a addition or subtraction word problem, you need to follow 4 steps to be sure that you are doing it the right way. So instead of just yelling out an answer, we have to be able to explain our thinking, what went on in our head, and how did we come up with that answer. Because when you get older, these word problems are going to become much trickier. So I want to give you the tools today to teach you exactly how to work through a word problem. Now, when you're doing a word problem, addition or subtraction, there are 4 steps that I want you to follow. How many? 4. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through these steps, and then I'm going to give you an example of how I would do these steps, and then I'm going to have you do the steps on your own. Okay, so our first step in a word problem, no matter what, is that we obviously need to understand the word problem. And so we need to read it, and we need to read it slow, and we need to make sure that it's making sense in our brain before we even try to tackle the problem. So the first thing you do is you need to read the problem. Okay, then you're going to want to circle any important numbers. So if I see numbers in there, I'm going to want to circle them because I know that I'm probably going to have to work with those numbers. And then also you want to underline any important words. So when you get older, you're not going to know whether it's an addition or subtraction problem until you read it. And so it's really important that we find those words that stick out to us to help us understand if it's an addition or a subtraction problem. So if it was an addition problem, you would probably see some words in your problem that sounded like this. You might hear the words in all, you might hear all together, you might hear total, and you might hear more. We know that all of those words mean that we're joining something together, and so our number is going to get bigger, okay? So if you see any of those words in your word problem, you're going to want to underline those because those help you know if it's addition or subtraction. If it's a subtraction word problem, you're going to hear words like less, how many are left, take away, and fewer. So be sure to underline any important words. Okay, that is our step number 1. Once you've circled your numbers and underlined important words and you've read the problem fully, you get to move on to your next step. And our next step is to plan. Okay, everything we do in life, we need to plan. We need to figure out how we're going to do it so that we can do it the right way and the easiest way and the best way. So when we can plan with so many different ways. And sometimes our planning with addition is going to look different than our planning with subtraction. So your job in the planning stage is to choose how you're going to solve the problem. What strategy are you going to use? So if it was an addition problem, you're probably going to choose something like counting on your fingers. You might choose drawing a picture. That's always one of my favorites. You might draw a number line and use the number line to help you add those numbers together. You might use counters where you can move something around and actually touch it to figure out the problem. Or you might use counting on, which is putting numbers in your head and then counting on from those. If you're solving a subtraction problem, you might use some of the same tools. You might do it on your fingers. You might use a number line or a picture. You might count back, so putting a number in your head and counting back from that number. And you might use counters as well. So your job in this planning stage is to pick what strategy are you going to use to solve this problem. Okay, so once you've decided that what you're going to do, you get to move on to the solve area. Okay, and this is where you show all of your work. So instead of yelling out an answer, here we want to see you solving it. What went on in your brain? How did you come up with that answer? And so you need to show us which strategy you used and show us so that you can solve your problem. So when you're solving, you want to be able to label things. You want to be sure that you're writing the number sentence or the equation out and showing all of your work, okay? So here you can see that there was a picture drawn. I labeled the picture. I circled how many there were when we added them together, and then I had my number sentence here. This is where you show all of your work. How did you come up with the answer that you came up with? Okay, now the last area that you need to do, so there's first, second, third, and the fourth step that you need to take in a word problem, which is probably the most important step, is checking your answer and explaining your work. Okay, it's really important that we are able to use words to describe what went on in our brain. Okay, so instead of just saying, I just know that's the answer, we have to be able to say, well, why do you know? How do you know? Can you tell me what steps you went through? And so when you're explaining your work, you're going to say things like, the strategy I used was, or you might say, first I did this, then I did this, last I did this, and that's how I got my answer. So you're using words to explain your work. Okay, so those are our 4 steps. We are now going to I'm going to show you an example of what those 4 steps look like in an actual word problem. Okay, so here is the word problem that we're going to work with today. There were 8 strawberries. Sam ate 3. How many strawberries are left? So this is my first stage. Now remember, I need to circle any important numbers and I need to underline any important words. And here I knew that 8 was an important number, so I circled it. I knew that 3 was an important number, so I circled it. And I see this when it says how many are left. I remember that that word goes with subtraction. So I know that they're starting with a certain amount. Someone's eating some and they want to know how many are left. And so my number is going to get smaller and I know that that's subtraction. So now that I understand the problem, now I have to plan. Remember all the strategies we can use to solve a word problem. One of my favorites is drawing a picture. So today I'm going to draw a picture for my strategy. Now some of you might want to solve this problem using a number line or counters. And just because I do it a certain way does not mean that you have to do the same. When we do math word problems, we get to do whatever works for us and whatever strategy we like best. Just remember that you need to be able to explain your thinking. So today, here's all the strategies that I could have picked from. I could have counted on my fingers. I could have used a number line. I could have used counters or counting back. But today I chose to draw a picture. So now that I know that I'm going to use a picture as my strategy, now I have to solve my problem. And so I drew my picture, and I remember with my important numbers up here that I had 8 strawberries. So I knew I had to draw 8 strawberries. So I drew 8, and I put these numbers under here to be sure that I had 8 because we don't ever want to miscount because that could mess up our whole problem. Now I'm solving. Then I crossed off 3 because I knew somebody ate 3 of them. And then I wrote my number sentence or my equation. I said 8 minus 3 equals 5. So I showed all of my work. I showed all of my thinking while I solved this problem. Now, one of the most important things is we have to check and explain our work. And that can be tricky sometimes. So I'm going to show you what that might sound like. Remember, when we explain our thinking, we can start off by saying what strategy you used, what you did first, what you did next, and what you did last. Okay, so I wrote out my thinking here, and I said that first I drew 8 strawberries. I labeled them to be sure that I had 8. Next, I crossed out 3 because I knew that Sam ate 3 and those strawberries were no longer there. Last, I counted how many were left, and there were 5. So I know that 8 minus 3 equals 5. Okay, that's how I explain my thinking. And so when you do your word problems at home, and remember they're going to get a little bit trickier with bigger numbers, I want you to try to use these 4 steps. You need to understand. You need to plan what strategy you're going to use. You need to solve and show all of your work, and you need to be able to explain your thinking that happened in your brain. Okay, so I am going to now leave you with a word problem and complete this using the 4-step plan and submit it in your Seesaw journal when you're done. Okay, my word problem is there were 10 kids at the park. 3 kids went home. How many kids are still at the park? I'm going to read it one more time. There were 10 kids at the park. 3 kids went home. How many kids are still at the park? That is my question. Remember to start off by circling important numbers and underlining important words to figure out if this is an addition or subtraction problem. Then plan how you're going to solve it. If you're going to use a picture, number line, counters, then show me all of your work that went on in your head and then explain it using words. Okay, when you're done with this, submit it to your Seesaw journal and we can't wait to see it. Good luck, have fun.